The battlefield was silent now, but silence never meant peace. Smoke still hung in the air, the smell of burned metal and blood rising from broken ground. The war between humans and the alien empire had ended, but not in glory for the ones who had thought themselves unstoppable. She stood there, shackled in iron that cut into her skin. Her head lowered, her once bright armor broken and stained with dirt. Her name had been feared across galaxies. Her voice had commanded legions, her orders had burned cities. Yet now there was nothing left for her. The alien princess who once made even human generals tremble was now nothing but a prisoner waiting for the final blow. Soldiers surrounded her, human eyes filled with anger, with grief, with memories of families lost and worlds destroyed. She knew what they wanted. They wanted her death. They wanted her to suffer as their people had suffered. She expected it. She welcomed it. After all, what else was left for her but punishment? Her life in truth had ended the moment her empire fell. Her chains were only a reminder of the crimes she could never erase. The humans dragged her across the ruins, past shattered buildings where children once played, past the graves marked only with broken helmets and burned flags. She felt the weight of their stares on her back as if every eye was a blade cutting into her flesh. She could not look up. She could not face them. Her chest was heavy, her breath shallow. She remembered her own orders, the way she had once demanded destruction of entire colonies. She remembered the fire she brought upon them, and she remembered how humans never surrendered. Even in defeat, even in despair, they stood. And now, she was the one on her knees. The soldiers lined her before a wall, the ruins of a human city that her empire had once destroyed. A commander raised his hand and rifles clicked into place. She closed her eyes. She had killed too many to count. Now it was her turn. Perhaps this was the balance the universe demanded. She did not beg. She did not cry. For the first time in her life, she waited silently for the end. But the end did not come. The sound of rifles never fired. Instead, she heard a single voice, a human voice, soft but firm. When she opened her eyes, she saw one soldier stepping forward. His armor was scratched, his face marked with both exhaustion and scars, but his eyes, they were not filled with rage. They were calm, though heavy with pain. He stood closer than the others, looking at her not as a monster, but as something else. Something he could not yet define. He lowered his weapon. The others shouted, calling him a fool, calling him blind. They demanded her blood. They demanded vengeance. But the soldier only shook his head. His voice rose above theirs, and it struck her heart like a blade sharper than any she had felt before. He said, "I forgive you." The words froze her. Forgive? She could not understand. Forgiveness was not part of war, not part of conquest. Forgiveness was weakness, and weakness was death. She stared at him, trying to read his face, but there was no hatred there. There was sorrow, yes, but also something she had never seen before. It was mercy. She did not know what to feel. Rage at his arrogance? Shame at his kindness? Her heart pounded. And for the first time since her capture, she felt something stir inside her. It was not pride, not anger. It was fear. Not fear of death, but fear of what his words meant. Forgiveness meant she was still alive. Forgiveness meant she was not free to escape her guilt. The other soldiers argued, demanding orders, but the commander hesitated. The human who spoke those words stood his ground, refusing to move. His gaze locked on hers, unbroken, unflinching. In that moment it felt as if the battlefield, the ruins, the noise all had faded away. There was only her, broken and chained, and him, a man who had lost much yet still chose to offer something she had never known. Her lips parted, but no words came. For someone who once commanded empires, she found herself speechless. Her throat burned, her chest tightened, her mind screamed at her to hate him, to reject him, to laugh at his foolishness. But she could not. His words held her in place, heavier than chains, sharper than blades. She lowered her head once more, not out of pride but confusion. Why had he chosen her? Why had he spoken those words? Why forgive someone who could never forgive herself? The question wrapped around her mind like fire, and she knew it would never leave. For the first time she realized her story was not over. Something darker, stranger, and more dangerous had begun. The human had changed everything with only 3 words. I forgive you. The night was heavy with cold winds, and the alien woman lay inside a narrow steel cage deep within the ruins of the city. The humans had not killed her, though many wanted to. They guarded her with sharp eyes, their rifles never far from reach. She could hear whispers in the dark, soldiers muttering curses against her name. men vowing that one day justice would be served. Every sound was a blade in her chest, but she remained silent, her eyes staring at the cracked ground beneath her. Sleep refused to come. When her eyes closed, memories forced themselves back. She saw fire raining down on human cities, the cries of children lost under collapsing walls, the smoke of worlds that she herself had ordered destroyed. She had once believed it was strength, proof that her empire could crush all resistance. But now, sitting in chains, she saw only shadows, shadows of the dead that followed her wherever she went. Her people had taught her that humans were weak, fragile creatures that broke easily. Yet during the war, she had learned the truth. Even when her armies burned their homes, humans fought back. Even when they had no hope, they stood together. She had mocked them once for this stubbornness. Now she envied it. Her own kind had abandoned her, but humans still stood for each other, even in ruin. The soldier who forgave her returned that night. She heard his footsteps before she saw his face. He approached her cage quietly, holding no weapon, only a lantern in his hand. The dim flame lit his scarred features, casting his eyes into a soft glow. He did not speak at first. He only watched her, as if waiting for something to break inside her. Finally, he asked, "Do you remember them?" She did not answer. Her pride told her to stay silent, to refuse him the truth, but his calm gaze forced her to speak. "I remember all of them." Her voice was low, bitter. "Every scream, every death. I gave those orders." The human did not flinch. He did not spit, did not curse her. Instead, he nodded slowly. "Then you know why they hate you. You know why they want you dead." She laughed bitterly, a sound without joy. "And yet you forgive me? Are you mad, human?" He stepped closer, placing the lantern on the ground between them. "Maybe I am, but what good comes from killing you now? The war is over. Our dead will not return if we shed more blood. Forgiveness is all we have left to stop the cycle." She stared at him, her heart tightening. Forgiveness. Again, that word. It was like a knife carving into her every time he said it. She wanted to shout at him, to call him a liar, but she saw no lie in his face. Only loss, only pain, and something she could not name. The silence stretched long. Her mind drifted to the empire she once ruled. She remembered her throne of silver, her generals kneeling before her, her armies chanting her name. Power had been her breath and victory her crown. But power was gone now, broken under human fire. Her throne was dust, her generals dead or hiding like cowards. She was nothing. Forgiveness from an enemy almost felt crueler than death. As dawn approached, the soldier still stood outside her cage. He told her of his family, of the home he had lost when her armies struck. He spoke with no hatred, only sorrow. His wife, his brother, his child, all gone. She listened, and for the first time she understood the true weight of what she had done. She had destroyed more than cities. She had destroyed love, laughter, futures. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had been raised to be steel, to never bend, to never show weakness. Yet here she was, breaking under the voice of a human who had every reason to kill her. The shadows of her past would not release her. Even when the soldier left, even when the guards changed shift, she remained awake, haunted by ghosts she could never escape. She pressed her hands against the cold steel of her cage, and for the first time she whispered to herself, "Why me? Why forgive me?" No answer came. Only the wind outside, carrying the voices of the dead. But in that moment she realized something terrifying. The forgiveness of one human had tied her fate to humanity in a way she could not break. And deep in her heart, hidden beneath layers of guilt and pride, a small thought began to grow. Perhaps forgiveness was not weakness. Perhaps it was the only weapon strong enough to wound her. The night ended, but her torment did not. She knew the shadows of her past would follow her forever. Yet now there was something else, something she had never felt before. A strange pull, a whisper in her mind that told her the war inside her had only just begun. The days turned into weeks, and she remained in the custody of the human soldiers. At first she expected cruelty. She expected them to starve her, to strike her, to make her beg. But they did not. They gave her food, bitter rations that tasted like dust, yet they kept her alive. They gave her water, though never enough to wash away the ashes of her sins, and always the human who forgave her returned. His face calm, his voice steady. He visited her more often than the others, sitting near her cage when the night was quiet. At first she ignored him. She kept her head low, her eyes fixed on the dirt. She told herself he was a fool. that his kindness was weakness, that his words would not reach her. But no matter how much she resisted, his presence began to gnaw at her silence. He did not speak of war anymore. He spoke of life. He told her of human traditions, of music played on broken instruments, of children who painted pictures on walls even when bombs fell around them. He told her stories of laughter that somehow survived the screams. She did not understand. How could humans laugh when death was so close? How could they love when everything they loved was torn away? She wanted to ask, but she kept her lips sealed. Yet each time he spoke, the questions pressed harder against her tongue. One evening, he brought her something different. It was a piece of paper folded many times, worn at the edges. He slid it through the bars of her cage without a word. She hesitated, then opened it. On the paper was a drawing, crude, childlike, but full of color. A small house beneath two suns, a family standing together. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers trembling as she touched the edges. "Who drew this?" she finally asked. "My child," he said softly, "before the war." Her chest tightened. She wanted to tear the paper apart, to throw it back at him, to scream at the weight it carried. But instead she folded it carefully and placed it on her lap. She did not give it back. For the first time she saw what her empire had destroyed, not through numbers, not through reports, but through the hand of a child who would never grow older. The bond began there, though she refused to admit it. She started to speak more. Small questions, small answers. She asked why humans valued life so much when life could be taken so easily. He answered simply, because life was all they had, and to waste it with hate was to become nothing. She asked why he forgave her when she had stolen his world. He answered, because hate would make him no different from the empire he fought. The words carved into her sharper each time. Slowly, against her will, she began to see herself not only as the destroyer but as something else. She began to wonder if change was possible, if the shadow of her past could ever be lifted. But not everyone shared his mercy. Other soldiers spat near her cage, their eyes burning with rage. Some called her a demon. Some threatened to kill her while she slept. And when they did, she felt the strange pull of fear, not for herself, but for the human who defended her. His kindness placed him in danger. His voice was the shield that stood between her and their bullets. One night the danger grew sharp. A group of soldiers came, drunk with anger and grief. They carried knives, their voices loud with hatred. They wanted her blood, and they wanted it quickly. She pressed herself against the far side of the cage as they rattled the bars, their hands reaching through, their curses filling the air. For the first time since her capture, she felt true terror. Not because of death, but because the bond she had formed would be shattered by violence. Then he came. The soldier who forgave her stepped between them, his voice cutting through the rage. He stood unarmed, yet unshaken. He faced his own comrades and ordered them back. They resisted, shouted at him, cursed his weakness, but his gaze did not falter. He told them killing her would not heal their wounds, would not bring their families back, would not end the war that had already ended. His words, like fire, burned their anger into silence. One by one they left, their hatred heavy in the air but their hands empty. When the last had gone, she looked at him through the bars. Her voice was low, trembling in a way she had never allowed before. "Why protect me?" He met her eyes without hesitation. "Because you are still alive. And as long as you are alive, there is a chance you can be more than what you were." Her heart beat hard in her chest. She turned away, unable to face the weight of his gaze. Yet inside something had shifted. The bond was no longer forced upon her. It had rooted itself deep, impossible to ignore. She hated it, feared it, but she could not escape it. The days ahead grew quieter. She listened when he spoke. She answered when he asked. And though the cage still held her, though chains still marked her skin, she felt something she had not felt since the fall of her empire. She felt alive, and that, she realized, was more frightening than death. The night sky was restless. Storm clouds rolled above the ruins, carrying a thunder that echoed like distant drums of war. The alien woman sat in silence inside her cage, her eyes fixed on the soldier who had given her something she did not ask for. Mercy. She did not yet understand it, and yet she had begun to feel it, like a shadow that never left. But that night something new arrived, something darker. The sound of footsteps came first, softer than rain. She knew at once they did not belong to the human guards. The rhythm was different, heavier, colder. She rose to her feet, pressing against the bars of her cage, her breath sharp. Then she saw them. Figures moving through the dark, their armor shining faintly beneath the lantern light. Not humans. Her own kind. Her heart froze. They had come for her. The humans guarding her lifted their rifles, voices rising in alarm. But the aliens moved with purpose, their weapons drawn, their eyes burning with the fire of loyalty she once commanded. One of them spoke in her tongue, sharp and demanding. "Princess, step forward. You do not belong in chains. You belong with us." Her chest tightened. For a moment she felt the old pull of command, the weight of her people's voice calling her back. She remembered her throne, her armies, her power. Here was her chance. Freedom was within reach. She only had to take it. But then she looked at the human soldier standing between her and her people. He had drawn his weapon, but his hands trembled. He knew he could not stop them if they wanted to take her. Yet he did not step aside. He placed himself in their path, his voice firm even against the threat of death. "She stays." The aliens sneered, their words dripping with contempt. "You forgive monsters, human. That is your weakness. She is ours, not yours." Her throat burned. She wanted to shout, to silence them, to claim her right as princess. But when she opened her mouth, no command came. Instead, she saw the fear in the soldier's eyes. Not fear for himself, but for her. He was ready to die to keep her safe, and in that moment she felt a choice heavier than any crown she had worn. If she stepped forward, she would return to her people, her power, her empire's remnants. But she would also betray the one human who believed she could change. If she stayed, she would lose her last chance of freedom, but she would prove his faith was not wasted. The air was tense, every second stretching like a blade. The aliens called her again, their voices rising with anger. She gripped the bars until her hands bled. She had been born to rule, trained never to bend, taught never to choose weakness. And yet, here she was, trembling not at the sight of her enemies, but at the thought of losing the one human who had given her more than chains. He had given her a chance. The choice came like fire through her veins. She stepped back from the bars. Her voice, steady but soft, carried through the storm. "I am not yours." The aliens froze. Shock flickered across their faces. The human soldier blinked, disbelief in his eyes. And then chaos erupted. The aliens attacked, their weapons blazing. The humans returned fire, the ruins echoing with thunder far louder than the storm above. The soldier rushed to her cage, fumbling with the keys, unlocking her chains. "If you stay, you fight with us," he said, his voice urgent. She did not hesitate. For the first time in her life, she stood not as a princess, not as a commander, but as something new. She tore a fallen weapon from the ground, the steel heavy in her hands, and faced her own people. They called her traitor. They cursed her name. They swore she would burn with the rest of humanity. But she no longer cared. Every strike she delivered was not for her empire. It was for the humans she had once tried to destroy, and for the one man who had forgiven her sins. The battle was brutal, short, and merciless. Bodies fell, blood stained the earth, and the storm above split open with lightning. When it was over, silence returned, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the ground. She stood, panting, her arms heavy, her body trembling. The human soldier stood beside her, his armor scarred, his face smeared with dirt, but his eyes steady. He looked at her not as a prisoner anymore, not even as an enemy. He looked at her as someone who had made a choice. Her heart pounded. She had turned her back on her people, her empire, her blood. She had chosen humanity. She had chosen him. But deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. Her own kind would not forgive betrayal, and the humans, though some might begin to see her differently, would never forget the shadows of her past. She had taken her first step toward something new, but the path ahead was darker than any war she had known. Still, as the storm broke and dawn began to rise, she felt something she had never known before. Not victory, not defeat, hope. And that, more than anything, terrified her. The ruins were quiet after the battle, but quiet did not mean peace. Smoke still curled upward from shattered walls, the ground slick with rain and blood. The alien woman stood in the center, her body trembling, her weapon falling from her hands as the weight of what she had done settled over her. She had struck down her own kind. She had chosen humanity. And yet, even as her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, she knew the fight was far from over. The human soldier stood beside her, his hand still gripping his rifle, his eyes fixed on her face. He did not speak. He did not need to. In his silence, she felt both relief and fear. relief that she was still alive, fear that he might not yet trust her. The bond between them had grown stronger, but it was fragile, like glass ready to shatter. The surviving humans gathered around, their weapons raised. Their eyes were sharp, filled with suspicion. One of them shouted, "She turned on her own, but for how long? What if it was all a trick?" Another spat at the ground, his voice thick with grief. "She killed our families. You think one act changes that?" The woman lowered her gaze. She did not argue. She knew their pain. She carried it inside herself like a shadow that would never leave. Still, the soldier who had forgiven her raised his voice above theirs. "She chose us tonight. She stood against her own kind. That means something." The others hesitated. Some lowered their weapons, some did not. Trust was not won in a single night. She felt their eyes burn into her, each stare a reminder of the blood that stained her hands. She wished for death, if only to end the weight of their hatred. But then she remembered his words, the same words that haunted her since the day she heard them. "I forgive you." As dawn broke, a message came from the human command. Reinforcements were arriving. They wanted her transported to the central base for trial. She knew what that meant. Trial was only another word for judgment, and judgment would lead to death. The humans might not execute her here, but their leaders would demand it. The soldier who forgave her was ordered to prepare her transport. That night, as the camp rested, she sat near the fire, chains once again locked around her wrists. The soldier sat across from her, his face weary. The silence between them stretched long, broken only by the crackle of flames. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Why do you still stand by me? You know they will kill me. Your leaders will not forgive." He looked at her, his eyes heavy with both sorrow and resolve. "Because I believe change is possible. If you die, nothing changes. If you live, maybe something does." His words cut deep. Change. Could she truly change? Could the blood of her empire ever be washed from her hands? She wanted to believe, but the voices of the dead still whispered in her ears. When the reinforcements arrived, they surrounded her with armored vehicles and soldiers. The commander, a hard man with eyes like stone, demanded she be handed over. He looked at her as if she were less than dirt, and his words were sharp with finality. "She will be executed for her crimes. That is the only justice." But before she could be dragged away, the soldier stepped forward. He placed himself between her and his commander, his voice unshaking. "No. If we kill her, we prove we are no different from those who slaughtered us. If we let her live, we prove that humanity is stronger than hate." The camp erupted in chaos. Soldiers shouted, some agreeing, some cursing his name. The commander raised his hand, ready to strike him down for defiance. And in that moment, the woman acted. She stepped forward, chains clattering, her voice ringing louder than the storm. "If you want blood, take mine. But know this, I am no longer theirs. I stand with him. I stand with humanity." Her words cut through the uproar. The humans froze, stunned by her declaration. For the first time, she had chosen openly, without hesitation, without hiding. The commander narrowed his eyes, anger twisting his face, but even he could not deny the weight of her choice. The trial would still come. The hatred would not vanish overnight, but something had shifted. A seed had been planted, fragile but real. She had betrayed her empire, yes, but she had also betrayed the darkness inside herself. For the first time, she felt the possibility of redemption, not through power, not through conquest, but through the strange, unyielding mercy of one human. As the sun rose over the ruins, she stood beside the soldier who had forgiven her. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger, mistrust, and the threat of betrayal from all sides. Yet she did not fear it. She had faced death before, but now she faced something far greater. She faced the chance to live not as a destroyer, but as something new. And in that quiet moment, with the dawn breaking over a broken world, she realized the truth. Her life had ended once in fire and blood, but it had begun again the day one human chose to forgive her.